Hello, everyone. Welcome to Aurora Connects. This is episode 4 for Friday, April 17th, 2020, The Art Behind the Art. My name is Josh Costello. I am the Artistic Director of Aurora Theater Company. And with me, of course, is our Associate Artistic Director, Dawn Monique Williams. Dawn, welcome.
Hey Josh, how's it going?
It's okay. How are you?
I'm very well this week. It's been a good week. I'm going to take a second to say my weekly reminder to folks that we would love to hear from our patrons and viewers. So if you have thoughts, questions, suggestions for episodes, suggestions for play quotes, or anything you would like to discuss with us, feel free to type in the YouTube chat box while you watch along. Or also you can send us an email at connects, CONNECTS at auroratheater.org, connects at auroratheater.org. We'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Dawn. Yes, and if people are interested in helping Aurora weather this storm, we are accepting donations. You can go to our website, auroratheater.org, and click on the donate link up at the top right. That makes a huge difference, so thank you for that. We are also selling subscriptions for 2020-2021 season, including Flex Passes. So please check out our website and see what we do when we can actually be in the theater. But for now, we are having Aurora Connects. This is our weekly virtual salon, our online happy hour, and we have a really wonderful guest that we're going to get to in just a moment. But first, Dawn, do you have a quote to share with us from a play?
I do. This week's quote comes from Kiara Hudis, Water by the Spoonful, the Pulitzer Prize winning Water by the Spoonful. Mm-hmm. Coltrane's A Love Supreme, 1964. Dissonance is still a gateway to resolution. A B diminished chord is still resolving to C major. A tritone is still resolving up to the major sixth. Diminished chords, tritones still didn't have the right to be their own independent thought. In 1965, something changed. The ugliness bore no promise of a happy ending. The ugliness became an end in itself. Coltrane democratized the notes. He said they're all equal. Freedom. It was called free jazz, but freedom is a hard thing to express musically without spinning into noise.
Yeah, no promise of a happy ending. What made you choose that quote for today?
Two things. One, the kind of declaration that dissonance is still a gateway to resolution, given our kind of current social climate and what we're all navigating as a global crisis, and how some days it feels all very dissonant to me. But also at the heart of this play is a virtual community. An online chat room is sort of the central meeting space. And as we, as theater makers, are navigating what that means for the field, as more of us are doing Zoom meetings, having virtual happy hours and salons, I thought it would be great to affirm that online community can be just as valuable and life-affirming since we have to maintain a distance right now.
Yeah, and just as real, just as meaningful to people. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much for that. If you have suggestions for a quote you'd like to hear Dawn read, you can email, as Dawn said, to connects at auroratheater.org. And now let's go to our guest for this week. I am so excited to introduce Elizabeth Lada. Liz and I shared an office for my first few years at Aurora. Liz, unmute yourself, please, and say hello. Welcome to Aurora Connects.
Hey, Josh and Dawn and everybody. Thanks so much for having me.
It's nice to see you. We're really glad you're here. Liz has been the artist behind the beautiful posters that you've seen for Aurora's shows. She was also the graphic designer for Aurora and worked as the graphic designer for several years, including the first few years when I was working at Aurora. And she's moved on to other things, but she's still painting the posters for our shows. And I'm really excited to look back at some of the shows that she's done for us previously, and also reveal the new art for this season, which is just absolutely gorgeous. Amanda, will you please put an image from some of the posters that Liz has done in the past, and then Liz and I can talk about them a little bit. I think we are looking at the poster of a bunch of different images. So we've got, what have we got? Tally's Folly, Actually, The Arsonist. Any of these that particularly stand out to you? Liz, can you tell us a little bit about just your style and how you work as an artist as we look at these images?
the one that resonates most with me, and I can talk about why it does, and that will kind of give you a door into how I'm thinking, is the arsonists. Um,
Ah,
and it's one of the first ones I did. I think it was the second season I worked here, but and one of the reasons I like that one is because I think a poster for a play needs to both reveal something and conceal something. You have to lure people in, make them curious about what this is about, and give them enough information so they can kind of guess, but also leave a mystery so they want to come and figure out what the mystery is about. And those two pairs of eyes, one looking fairly innocent and the other one looking directly at you, and then of course his head is on fire. So you
right.
know something's going on, but it looks kind of confusing perhaps and a little mysterious. So hopefully people want to come and figure out the big reveal. And I love doing figurative stuff. I think that really resonates with people, although you can't always do it. It gets a little tedious having faces for every single one, I realize, but I think that's a nice draw as well.
Yeah. Let's look at Little Eric, because that's the one that there was a New York Times article about poster art for plays, and this piece and you were featured in that New York Times article a few years ago. Tell me about the poster for Little Eric. This was an adaptation of an Ibsen play that Mark Jackson wrote and directed for us, and this one is just a stunning piece of art. What was the thinking behind this one?
You know, I tried to come up with a more of an intellectual concept about that. It was a very layered play with lots of connections between people that changed throughout the play. I didn't want to reveal too much of what it was, but I also wanted to kind of give some, I tried to give some kind of a more meaningful design to it, but it didn't quite come. But what was coming was the emotion, that emotion of being lost and being surrounded by people you don't totally trust and you don't quite understand. So having these two kids lying in the leaves, one upside down, looking worried, looking scared, looking like they were a little lost. I tried to catch more of the emotional thing behind the play. As we know, if we've seen the play, that one of those kids is no longer alive, and it's kind of putting two time periods together. But I thought it kind of gave that feeling of uncomfortableness, fear, timidity, something, and the innocence of childhood, but not completely innocent. So it's more of an emotional thing.
I'm always struck by the way that your art captures something very true and central about the theme of the play that often is like completely unexpected and non-realistic, something that is very poetic and metaphorical about it. And I'm thinking about Year of Magical Thinking and that piece of art. And you know, she's got the three hands, she's got the flowers over her face. Like how did that? That's the Joan Didion book that was turned into a play as a solo show. What was your thinking? How do you get from reading a text to finding such an evocative, non-literal image?
You know, that one I had a little help from Tom in that he said he wanted to do Joan Didion. He wanted to have her face in there, so that was a given, which is fine with me. That was fun to do. But I was trying to figure out. You know, the play was about the death of two beloved people, and it was about her confusion. But it also was a hopeful play. It wasn't a depressing look at death. It was kind of realistic, but also positive in some ways, hopeful. And the calla lilies, to me, I think that they are used, at least in some cultures, in funerals. I think that's true.
Uh-huh.
But they're also beautiful flowers. And I thought the fact that they were mostly covering her vision, it implied a certain confusion, and she was blinded by this, but she was also seeing through it. So, and the three hands just kind of came afterwards. I realized I could do something with stems. What could I do with the stems to make it make sense? And then I realized, well, we could have the three people's hands, her hand, her husband, and her daughter, all holding the stems, because that's how our lives are entwined. And she learned through both her husband and her daughter. So anyway, it was a partial just coincidence of having stems and needing to do something with them, and Tom telling me what to do in some ways. So
yeah, so
it grows.
Yeah, Tom is my predecessor, this artistic director at Aurora, and you and he worked very closely on creating these, and now you and I are working together on creating them for the next season. But let's look at one more. Let's look at Breakfast with Mugabe, which is another very evocative piece. Tell us about what's going on with that one.
Well, in some ways, Tom also asked me to do, in this case, a portrait of both Peter Callender, who was playing the part of Mugabe, and Mugabe, so to look like both of them. And they don't look that alike, although putting a little mustache on always helps anybody look like Mugabe. So there was that. And the whole title, Breakfast with Mugabe, is like breakfast is kind of this innocent, sweet meal. And then Mugabe makes us all kind of shudder. So I wanted to do something that had a frame of innocence, but actually was it was kind of scary. So both having his face looking at you from the coffee or the tea, what were they drinking? I don't remember. And then having this cracked cup just indicated that there's danger there in this innocent setting with sugar cubes, right? And I think the Africa design came a little later. I just realized that it could, and then why not? And then of course, Tom would like to have the flag of, what country were they in? Whatever country it was. He wanted the flag. What was that?
Is it Zimbabwe?
Zimbabwe, right? Zimbabwe reflected in the shape of Africa, and I really tried. There are some things I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It's gonna be brown, Tom. So.
All right.
Well, Liz, I've been a fan of your art for Aurora shows for some time now, and I'm really curious about how you became an artist. What's your background? If you trained as an artist or graphic designer, would you share a little bit about that?
You know, I didn't. I'm self-taught. When I was in high school, I was kind of known as the artist at school, and I thought that was just so. I was so tired of it, of being known as that, and I wanted to be an academic, and I thought artists were kind of not as quite as cool as academics. So I went to go get a PhD, and in the middle of the PhD, which was enjoyable but tough, and I was looking forward to getting a job as a professor or something, and it just in this backstabbing, tough world of academics. And I was designing a logo for some research paper, and a professor came in and he said, "Wow, if I could draw, I would be out of this profession in a minute." And it's just, what am I doing? Drawing is fun, and this is hard. And so I decided, what the heck? So I started working for our local paper. This is University of Michigan, so the Ann Arbor News was still around, and I started working as an illustrator there, and kind of learned on the job. So no, I've never had any training.
How did you end up in Berkeley at Aurora Theater as the graphic designer for 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, I worked for the Chronicle for 10 years or so. I went from newspaper to newspaper, ended up at the Chronicle, and then I went freelance and raised kids, and had that experience, which was wonderful. But the bottom fell out of illustration for a while because of the digital world happening, and it just there's times when illustration is more popular and times when it gets less popular and photography takes the lead. So I just kind of dropped out of it for a while. And then I realized I missed it a lot. And I was looking around where could I be creative and have some freedom, as well as have some fun. And I love theater. I didn't know a lot about it, but I like it. So the job opened up. I said, what the heck, why not? So I ended up with Julie and Tom and Josh, and had a great time for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years.
And now that you're no longer the Aurora graphic designer, you're just doing the show art for us. We want to talk a little bit about that process and perhaps how you collaborated with Tom, and then how you now collaborate with Josh.
Mm-hmm. Really, this is one of my favorite jobs to do. I still work as an illustrator and designer, but I always love to do these, and they're always a challenge. I was telling Josh some history I had in the background. I was illustrating for 20 years, and for 10 of those, every illustration I made, halfway through, I thought it was going to be a failure. I just thought, I can't do this. I'm a fraud. I've never been trained. What am I thinking? And it would always work out. And it took about 10 years for me to figure out that, well, maybe I can actually do it. but I have that little bit of that. Every time I read a play, I thought, oh no, I can't do this. I can't capture the play. It's not going to work.
I feel the
I
same
have a
way when
little,
I'm directing. Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, but it's always fun. The process, I read the plays, and I usually read them the first time through just reading a play, not trying to think of anything specific. Then I read it again, and then I try to pick out, is there any visual things that just really stand out? Some plays have real obvious themes, and like The Arsonist, it's obvious it's fire, and Mugabe is obviously Breakfast with Mugabe. That was pretty easy. Some plays are like Little Eric is like, I don't, nothing jumped out at me right away. And so I start, I start with words. Actually, I start just writing down words, stream of consciousness, what comes out, and I begin to see themes. And then I go into a meditative thing, where you just kind of let your mind go and just try to visualize. And sometimes, a lot of times, things pop into my head at that point, and I go with it. Oftentimes, what happens, I try to give Josh and Tom, 2 or 3 sketches anyway, sometimes 4 ideas of things to do.
And these are pencil sketches. You do by hand. Mm-hmm.
Right. And I actually make them as rough as possible because I don't want to promise too much. I want to promise a little bit so I can change my mind as things go or if they're not working. But anyway, so some rough pencil sketches. Sometimes it happens, one idea is really great and I have to come up with some more, but I know they're not that good. And usually Tom and Josh have picked the one that I think is going to work well. Sometimes not, but anyway.
So we're looking at an image of some of those sketches right now and looking at like the different versions of Sex with Strangers that you sent to Tom and the different versions of The Ruler and looks like Loot and Exit Strategy as well. So that would have been for this current season. And I love getting these. I mean, it's so fun to sort of see what the possibilities are and then be able to talk about them. And sometimes it's, oh, let's go, with this one, but with some of that in it. But it's, one of the big things for me is always like we're also trying to sell the show, right? So there's like making beautiful art. And then there's also this like weird question of what's going to get people excited about coming to see it. How do you balance those two things? Or do you just make the art and let us worry about, is it going to sell tickets?
No, I always think that illustration is in the service of the product that it's trying to sell. And essentially this is what it is. And that has to happen, and the beauty comes after. But hopefully it's happening at the same time. So, but I've had some times with Tom where I've said, I think this is going to be a prettier piece of art, and he says, yeah, maybe, but that's not going to work very well. And I have to listen to him. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's happened with you and me yet, Josh, but it might. But I do put on my, my theater producer hat when I'm trying to, or my marketing hat when I'm doing some of these ideation to make sure that I think, okay, this is something that will draw people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm curious in terms of how the two of you collaborate, because Liz, before we went live, you used the term art direction. You said something about Josh's art direction. And I know since I've joined Aurora, I've seen that you do submit 3 or 4 kind of rough ideas. And then you and Josh have a deep kind of back and forth. So Josh, what do you see as your role in all that? And how many exchanges do you both feel like you have in that process of arriving at like a finished product?
Well, I think it varies in terms of the number. Like sometimes, there's a clear winner right away and we're like, oh yeah, let's go with that. And then other times it's a harder nut to crack. I think we'll come back to this when we look at the shows for this coming season a little bit, and we can talk about some of that. But I see it as as a director of a play, your job is always to articulate the story of the play. And first you're articulating it to yourself and sort of figuring out what it is, and then you're articulating it to the design team, and then you're articulating to the actors, and then in directing the play, you're articulating the story of the play to the audience. And I think it's the same idea of what is the centerpiece of this story? What is the thing that encapsulates, what this action of the play is, what the story of the play is? And so part of it is about like, what's the most, powerful way to express that idea visually? And part of it is what's going to get people excited about coming to see it. And hopefully those two things are the same and are working together.
Yeah. I've often had a push, sometimes from Tom and sometimes from other art directors, to be a little bit more narrative in my work, to kind of show the stage, show the people, kind of as if it was a scene from the play. And sometimes that does work. That's not typically where I like to go with that. I think it's a little bit too. It gives people too much of an idea of, oh, this is exactly what I'm going to be seeing, and that's not ever what it actually is. So I try to do something that's a little bit more symbolic, that people can kind of co-create with you. They're looking at, they have their own interpretation of what they see.
Yeah, yeah. So for example, we're looking at now the sketches and then the art for the children, which was just a beautiful piece of work, and very much not what people saw on the stage, but something else entirely. You want to talk us through the children a little bit and what you did for that? This is the one that's the wave.
You went to completely garbled there. I think you talked about the children.
The children, yes.
Children. Okay. All right. Yeah. And you wanted me to talk about the background of that. That's one that I took a bit of a leap last time. You can see it's different than some of the other ones that are done in a more realistic style. That play was so powerful, and it actually resonates with what's happening right now. We're not going through a nuclear disaster, but we're going through some other disaster, and this unseen thing is about to hit us, right? And the play is about a nuclear disaster that has happened but hasn't yet hit this seaside house, and it's a feeling of dread and fear that is pervading this play. So I wanted to. That was the most powerful thing about the play. Is this thing is coming to get us, and so the visual of the waves, since they're right by the sea, and just depicting it with color and size. So they have this huge wave, and it's just this irradiated, beautiful but sinister colors, and this tiny little innocent house. And the fact that the name is called The Children makes it even this the innocents that are being threatened by this toxic wave. And it was just fun to make all the different colors and the shape.
Yeah, well, it turned out really, really well. And I see on that one, there's one of a hand holding up a house sticking out of the water. There's like a couple of different designs there. When you submitted this to Tom, do you remember, were you thinking it would be a different one, or was this the one that you were really hoping for, or how did that go?
This is one of the ones where I said, I don't think this is going to go. I don't think he's going to go with this wave one. He's going to want to have something that's a little more like my old style, maybe a little more symbolic, more representative. So I was surprised that he said go for it. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk about the
just to let you know, I can barely. I'm not
Dawn,
hearing you, Josh.
You want to take the next question?
Sure. We're just wanting to pivot to the ruler so that we're looking at some of your concept sketches juxtaposed to where we finally landed and what that process was for you.
Are we losing you, Liz? Are you not hearing us?
Well, it's kind of broken up. I think you said something about the sketches that I do and the process of something.
Yes, for the ruler.
Oh, for the ruler.
Yeah.
Do I remember why that?
How about your
here, guys? What? I'm going to look at that picture maybe, and it'll help me remember what I was doing. You don't have that here.
Liz, if you can hear me, we'd love to hear you talk about the actual physical process of creating these as well. Are you working by hand? Are you working on the computer? Like, what materials are you using? How do you go, like, from that first sketch? Is that something you do by hand and then scan in? And then the final product, how is that actually created?
Okay, and I'm hearing you fine now, so great.
Okay.
Yes, I do everything by hand. Everything is until the final stage of scanning it in. It's all done by hand. I do go on the web to kind of get material ideas, figure out what crowns look like or whatever. But then I do it all in pencil sketch. I scan them in. I send them as a PDF or a JPEG to you guys. I have been, in the past couple of years, I scan them in and then sometimes I manipulate them. And you can see that in the ruler. I think you can see that there's one that is the full screen and is kind of red and blue. And then there's one that's more cropped and it's more green. Isn't that right? The original painting is the one that's kind of blue and red. And I just thought the colors were weak and not interesting. So in Photoshop, I made them green. And then I realized cropping it in made it a much more powerful image. So that was all post-production in a sense, but it's all done with acrylics or oils.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting that it is this combination ultimately where you're doing it by hand with acrylics and then continuing to manipulate it with Photoshop afterwards. Yeah. Cool. Dawn, you wanted to comment on?
I do. I know you're itching to the big reveal, but I just wanted to share with Liz how your artwork can sometimes inform the process, because I wasn't on Aurora staff yet when you did the work for Bull in a China Shop. And in fact, Bull in the China Shop artwork had the job before me. But I was really taken with how it was the figure of both women together that created the silhouette of the bull. And that really informed our process in rehearsal when we were talking about who is the bull in a China Shop? Is it just one of the characters? Is it both of the characters? Do they together form the bull? So I just was really taken by your comments in terms of when you read the play and you're looking at symbols and how do you sell the story. And I wanted to let you know that as a director who had no contribution to what the show art would be, that the show art actually was very invaluable to our discussions and conversations.
That is so interesting to hear. I'm glad you shared that with me. I had no idea, obviously, but that's fun. There's always been a bit of a question about if directors could be involved in the design of the posters, because obviously directors probably have a lot of ideas about that, and I think there's sometimes directors are not maybe as taken with the posters as they might. So, but I think that's never been part of the process. So I'm glad to hear it worked this time.
Yeah, I know. Well, I remember when I was not the artistic director, but I was directing at Aurora and was, wanted to, I had ideas and I had things I wanted to do, but I realized that having another person in the process who has a different set of things at stake really slows it down.
For sure.
When I was working with Josh and Tom, we were all in the same room together. And so Tom and I would have conversations about the place. And I would, out of the side of my eye, I could see Josh like, wanting to say something, but
hiding behind my computer. Biting my tongue.
We're good at that.
Yeah.
I get to do that.
Let's move on and talk about the shows that we have coming up. So we announced our 2020-2021 season a few weeks ago, and we are, ordinarily right now we'd be sending out a brochure with your beautiful artwork all over it, and because of the situation, we're not in the building. Doing the physical brochure is not happening. There's a lot of questions about how next year is going to go, but we still have this art and we still want to share it with people, and it's so gorgeous. So we're just going to go in order and look at the each of the posters, and then we'll go back through and look at some of the sketches leading up to them. So let's start with The Bluest Eye. I see we have that up now. Dawn, can you just give us a real quick introduction to this play, to the Bluest Eye, and then we can talk to Liz about the poster?
As I mentioned a couple weeks ago, it's really a coming of age story. The focus really is on these three young girls, two of them most specifically as they kind of come into who they are as young women, and they're dealing with big questions of race and trauma and gender and abuse. So the title comes directly from the Morrison novel, of course, where the primary young girl, Piccola, has an obsession with Shirley Temple and whiteness and wants blue eyes.
Mm-hmm. And so this is what we have. So of course, this is Toni Morrison's novel, Lydia R. Diamond's adaptation of Toni Morrison's novel. Anything you want to say real quick about this one, Liz, before we cut? We'll come back and talk about the whole process, but how do you, looking at it now that it's done and out here, what sort of stands out to you about this one?
That was a very powerful play. It's an amazing play, and the longing for this girl to have blue eyes is just so it tears at my heart, and that the blue eye had to be in it, given the name of the play as well, but just had to be in the poster. So you can see all those sketches have a blue eye around it, and also I wanted to show her her face, her poignancy. It was especially about the one girl that wanted the blue eyes. So here's a place where those two other sketches, the one with the book, which makes sense because she was reading about these white girls in a book, and then the eye in the sky. We're just like fluff. The real sketch was the one in the middle.
Yeah, you knew that was a real one. I'll just give you something else, just so I've given you 3 options, but we all know what it's really going to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's beautiful. All right. And let's go to Cry It Out and talk about this one. So this is the play by Molly Smith Metzler that is a remount of Just Theater's production from last year in San Francisco, or earlier this year, really. And it is a play about motherhood, about trying to balance your life when you have a baby, and trying to figure out how you're going to do it, and all the different ways that affects different people. Tell us about this poster a little bit, Liz.
Well, the title has 2 levels, as you all know. That letting a baby cry it out is one parenting technique that, for the most part, these gals weren't doing. But the philosophy in some ways behind that is kind of stuffing your emotions down, not being honest about what you're feeling, and so you just cry it out. And I felt that these women were dealing with, and man were dealing with, how parenthood can trap, or can feel like a trap sometimes. So putting her in the stroller that obviously she doesn't fit in, evoke that same kind of sense of that are you trapped by this? Is it something that is not freeing you, but is something that is actually limiting you? This, for me, it wasn't the best approach, but I couldn't quite get what I wanted from this. So this is as good as it gets to this time.
Interesting. I think it's pretty nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you've sort of made her look a little bit like Lauren English, who's playing that role in the show. Yeah.
That was fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. All right. Let's go to The Island. This is the play by Ethel Fugard and Winston Nchona and John Connie from South Africa. And this is another one where you've just done such a beautiful job, but it's a play about 2 prisoners at Robben Island, which is where Mandela was held for many years. And they are rehearsing a performance of Sophocles of Antigone, and in their prison cell they're rehearsing. And so you've tell us what you've done with this one.
Well, as you can see from the sketches there, the one that you chose was the lower left-hand one, but you can see how much I've changed it to the final. It's the play within a play, and the man who plays Antigone had used a mop to make his hair. So that's what you can see growing out of the top of his head is the mop. And I had it short as it was in the sketch, and it just didn't hold together. And there was something missing about it. So 2 things happened. One is I said, let's just see what happens if I wrap the mop around the faces, the bottom of the faces of these 2 men. And that, again, a kind of a theme of entrapment and muzzling. So it almost goes over their mouths, not quite, because they're in jail, right? They're entrapped there. But at the same time, splitting it and putting the words in there makes it look like an island. Did you notice that, Josh? There's an island in there. And that didn't come to me.
Very good. Very clever.
I can't say I thought of it. It just, okay. And again, kind of like The Arsonist, there's this one guy looking off and the other guy is looking at you, and I hopefully creating a sense of disturbance, because the whole play is, there's funny parts in the play, but there's some also very dark parts in the play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was so moved by all of the sketches for this one, and the one at the lower right is just an incredible. I can't look away from it, and I felt like it was probably too intense even for a poster art, but it's like such a compelling, interesting image. Can you talk about that one a little bit?
Well, I think you're probably right. I think that'd be a good editorial for a magazine or something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you want to read it, but I don't know if I'd want to go sit 2 hours in something that made me feel like
Right,
that.
right, right.
So I think you were right about that one. But again, you know, I was having this face submerged into the ground. Um, weren't they buried in sand? Wasn't that what happened at the beginning?
They're
Right?
they're they're
They
shoveling piles of sand and moving
right,
them over into
right.
the other pile
Right.
and the infinite.
Yeah. Again, maybe this is my thing. Maybe I should figure out why. But again, more the entrapment and being muzzled, and but at the same time being able to speak out through that. Which and there was so much anger in the play, as well as I say, humor. That's what's depicting only the anger.
Mhm. All right, thank you. Let's go to father-daughter. Dawn, will you tell us a little bit about father-daughter?
Sure thing, sure thing. This is going to be our world premiere at Aurora of Kate Kerrigan's Two-Hander. And the play is really looking at two romantic relationships that are happening 23 years apart. So we look at the father as he embarks on a new relationship with this, what goes on to be his second wife. And then we jump back in time and look at his daughter as she's kind of experiencing her first major romance, and how their relationship, the father and the daughter, how their relationship through time shapes each of their romantic relationships independently. And it's quite lyrical and quite beautiful. And just two actors play all four characters.
Yeah, so you have a man who plays the father, but then also plays
The daughter's love
the
interest.
daughter,
Yeah.
and a woman who plays the father's new love interest, but also then plays the daughter, and you keep jumping back and forth, 20 years forward, 20 years back, and so it's, you know, it feels like you're meeting four very distinct people, but really it's just two actors doing it. We went through some changes on this one. There's a scene. Well, you tell us about it, Liz.
This one, it ended up being more of a pretty picture than anything else. We had a lot of, I had a lot of ideas. It just didn't seem to be quite catching the, I was trying to be too symbolic and put too much meaning into the play. And Josh finally said, you know, there is a point in this where the father and the daughter are dancing. Is that right?
No, it's the father and his girlfriend.
His girlfriend are dancing.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, I'm thinking the father and the daughter are dancing, but let's go with that anyway. And that seemed to capture something about the complexity of the relationship and the love between them and the connection and the independence, and that's all with dealing with the play. So I thought that was a nice way to end up. So this is all Josh's idea. He gets credit.
I mean, my idea, to be clear, was like, what about something with them dancing? You know, but that sense of release, like it's a moment where, and Graham Smith, who's directing the play, talks about the importance of this moment. The playwright Kate Kerrigan talks about the importance of this moment in the play as being really central to it. That you know, so much of the play is about sort of emotional holding yourself in, emotional repression. And there's this scene where the father sort of lets loose and dances, and it's not like a rehearsed choreographed dance. It's spinning and you know, flailing almost, right? It's just giving in to the impulse. And so finding, you know, it seemed interesting to have that be the moment that gets pulled out for the poster.
Yeah, and even beyond that, the first pass at that concept, once Josh gave it to you, is quite different than where you landed for the final. Stylistically, it's quite different.
Absolutely. Well, part of that is I got a little bit of feedback from Josh. This is fine. This is good. Go for it. And I thought, I'm reading into this that I might want to pull back to be something a little more realistic then. And this will segue into the next poster because I kind of use the same style there. So but some consistency is good.
Yeah, let's look at the next one then. Three Tall Women. So this is Edward Albee's play. Dawn, you want to give us a little taste of this one?
Yes, again, Three Tall Women is focused on three characters, one in her 90s, one near middle age, one in her 20s, all brought together as the one in advanced age is kind of reflecting on her life. And we kind of see how the three of them engage and sort of what conflicts persist among the three of them. And then in Act 2, we sort of take a different shift and learn a kind of big reveal about the three characters that I personally don't want to give away, even though I suspect most people are pretty familiar with the play anyway. But it's special to me, so I'm going to keep it a secret.
Somebody out there doesn't know.
Let's hope.
So what a striking image. Tell us about this one.
Yeah, this one was the kind of the first one I decided to do this year. And I took a step out, and I asked Josh, is this going to be okay? There is a painter here down in Stanford, where I live, who's dead now, Nathan Oliveira, who paints these amazing figurative stuff, which this is taking off of his style. So they're a little dreamy, but all of his figures are sensitively done, and they seem very strong, even though they're kind of have a fuzzy quality about them. So I took his style and did this actually in oils. And you can see, for one thing, the sketch that I sent, I have a funny story about another friend of mine who's an illustrator who says he does his sketches holding his pen like this. Because he wants them to be really rough, so no one can hold him to anything. So that's just, it's gonna be three figures, okay? That's all I want you to know. The one on the left is actually the painting. But you see it looks at the end like there are two figures who are more connected and smaller, and the other one's more dominant, and that really is not what happens in the play. So I actually went into Photoshop and I enlarged the other two figures to make them a little more size.
Tell us about the title treatments.
Those are really important, and I probably should take more time at the beginning to figure out exactly what I'm going to do. Here I knew I was going to have them tall and thin in between the two women. But a lot of times I do have the title treatments in mind from the very beginning. Sometimes I don't, and that's a mistake, because I come to the end and say, oh crap, where is it going to go? But this one, I thought that it created a nice fourth character, a tall, thin title. So it just seemed to fit.
Yeah, we had a viewer asking if you do the typography as well, which you do, and then it goes to what happens. So then after it's with you, and then you turn it into us. You have been also the graphic designer for us, but you're not now. And so then what's the next step for it after it comes to to us and it gets approved? Then what happens to the art? How does it then get?
I send the art separate from the title so that they can do what they want with the title, because they had to put this in many different formats, sometimes vertical, sometimes horizontal. You have to figure out where to crop it and how to fit it into things. So the title is separate so they can do what they want with it, and it appears in online places and on physical posters. And now I think in the lobby there's not a huge poster anymore. It's a monitor, right, that shows these posters.
We have sometimes we do a poster too, but yeah.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah, that's when I used to tell people that I worked at the Aurora and I did these posters, and they visualized that, oh, the posters must be so much fun and that must be the main part of your job. And it's like, no, about 10% is doing the poster and 90% is sticking the darn poster into all the different formats.
Into an ad for the online thing and into an ad for this and the program. And yeah. Well, now you get to just do the fun part, right?
I know. I have a best of both worlds.
Yeah. We have a wonderful graphic designer now, Karen, who is loves getting the art in and figuring out how to put it all together. So yeah, it works.
Yeah, it's a challenge to figure out how to make it work all those places. So,
well, Liz, you've done just a beautiful job. I'm so excited to put these out into the world and to share them. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. As I say, it's one of my favorite things to do, and it's always fun to work with you and the whole team.
Yeah, awesome. What's one thing that's bringing you joy during this shelter in place? What's something that's keeping you going?
Well, two things. One is that I'm doing a lot of my own painting, and so if you're a painter and you're stuck in your studio, oh darn, I'll have to paint. So that's been very fun. And I have an online group of painters who we share our stuff with, so we're doing a lot there. And I have a granddaughter, and I can't say how, I know some people here have young children, and that's been a challenge to be trying to work at home with young children, but working at home granddaughter when their parents are there to take care of her, it's a joy. So both those things. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Liz. I really appreciate you coming on the show. This was so interesting and so fast. fascinating, and I'm so grateful that we get to work together and have this beautiful artwork.
Absolutely. Thank you all. It's been fun.
Thank you. Thank you. So that is going to be our show for the week. Let's see. What else do we need to say, Dawn?
Yeah, I should remind folks once again of our offer of technical support. If you need help getting on Zoom or Skype or FaceTime or anything like that, we do have our technical director standing by to talk you through that over the phone. So if you want to drop us an email at techsupport, TECHSUPPORT at auroratheater.org, Cameron will give you a call back and talk you through that as best he can.
All right. And once again, if you'd like to help Aurora out, help us weather the storm, help us get through, you can go to our website and hit the donate button at the top right, auroratheater.org. We accept checks too if you want to put something in the mail. Dawn, if people have questions for future episodes, what do they do?
They email us at connects@auroratheater.org. Connects@auroratheater.org with questions, comments, quotes that they want me to read. Just drop us a line.
And next week, we will be talking about the process of directing a play. So it will be Dawn and me, and we'll have Daryl V. Jones, who's directed a couple of shows with us, and probably a couple of other directors as well. So tune in next week, 4 p.m. on Friday. And thank you all so much for being here. Thanks for staying connected with Aurora Theater Company. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.